One more time, we're talking about consumerism and how it has reached its tentacles into all parts of Western life, American life, even the American church. And we've had some interesting kind of freewheeling conversations, Josh, have we not? I mean, we've confessed sins. We have analyzed social trends. But my name is Dan, and I am one of the teaching pastors at
Potentially
Life
got in
Fellowship.
trouble with our spouses.
Yes. I'm really hoping nobody sends these to my wife. But I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in Cornelius, North Carolina, suburban Charlotte. I'm with Josh Brahm, who's our executive producer and the founder and president of the Equal Rights Institute. And the purpose of this podcast is just kind of talk about things that are real in the life of believers, real in the life of Josh and Dan. And so we've been talking about this thing of consumerism. And today I kind of want to focus on, how do we fight it? Yeah. How do we fight it?
Yes.
And I don't think it's it's not to be like a monk
right.
where you sell everything and you go and live in a monastery, though I happen to think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It may be a good thing. It may be a calling.
God seems to call some people to do that.
Absolutely. I don't think it requires us to live lives of destitution, of unnecessary need. I don't think there's anything noble in that unless we have been called to do that. I don't think we have to apologize for living if we understand that we had no choice in being born in this culture, at this time, in this country, with the color of skin we have or the parentage we had, and have this notion that I should be grateful. I should be just grateful for life itself and all the good things that come from it. And we start from that premise, and then it makes us grateful, and gratitude often is the precursor to generosity. So why did God give me this opportunity? Why? I'm thankful I didn't get born 400 years ago or 600 years ago. I like indoor plumbing.
Oh, yeah. I think about this a lot.
Air conditioning? Yeah, man, I'm all for that.
Yeah,
maybe destroying the ozone, but I'm still good with it. I like the fact I can get in a car and go somewhere in 20 minutes and I don't have to saddle up a horse.
Yep.
So I'm grateful. And of all the times to be born, certainly we have. But the gratitude ought to take root and produce fruit in our lives. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. What can we do? And I would start with this. I think parenting, I think leaders, I think if we're disciple makers, if we're leaders of any kind, we need to be making the modeling of contentment and good stewardship very obvious. I think there's ways we can do that. I think there are things, and I've said this, I don't buy new cars. Frankly, I could afford to.
Right.
It's not going to be a brand new BMW, but I could afford I'm 63 years old. I don't have kids at home. I've worked if I wanted to go down. I don't think I could pay cash for it, but I could afford a new car and pay the payment and be just fine. I don't want to do that. I don't want my kids to see that in me. I would rather take an extra missions trip or two a year and drive a used car. Yeah. I'm not trying to say that to be noble. That's just how I think.
It's just like, if that feels objectively like just a better use of money.
Yeah.
Like, that almost feels like you almost can't debate whether or not you should even consider getting a new car instead of, no one who knows about money thinks that you should buy a new car, I feel like, right? Like, you lose so much as soon as you drive it off the lot anyway.
And you know what? If you're pulling in $1 million a year or whatever, and you buy a new car every time, and that's between you and God. I don't care. No, I don't think you're better or worse than me for doing it. I'm just telling you the way I view it and the way I see it. But I would say this: at some point, we are all going to stand before God and say, with the resources that you assigned to me, this is how I invested them.
Yeah.
And this. If you buy a new car and you pass by and never do something for the poor, then I think you're going to stand before God. If you buy a new car and you never tithe, I think you're going to stand before God before it. I think that if you don't care about injustice and you only care about comfort, that you'll stand before God and give account for that. So in that, I think we can thoughtfully model what it means to be joyful with less and wise with excess.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important for our kids to see, and I think it's important for us to practice. I talked about simplifying our lifestyle last time, but I really think that is a good thing to do as well. And again, I've already confessed to the fact that I'm not as simple as I should be.
Because you have 2,000 succulents? Is that
no,
why?
no, quite frankly, because I live in a 3,400 square foot where I have, a family of 6 at times living in it. And at this stage, there's 3 of us, and there will always be 3 in my home, but I don't need a 3,400 square foot home. I say, well, you know what? I've got a 2.75 interest rate. So there are other areas I can cut back on, but I think I need to put everything on the table and consider whether or not God would have me live simpler and better.
Yes.
Because it's pretty stupid if I become in bondage to a 2-story house when I'm 75 years old and I can't climb stairs anymore.
Yeah.
It is stupid to be in bondage with $40,000 worth of consumer debt, and I know I'm not going to live long enough to pay it off.
Yeah.
I think those kind of things have to be considered. And if you have not prepared for retirement, if you are not leaving a legacy for your children, if you are not able to pay your bills at the end of the month, then at that time, it's good to look at your life and say, there's only, I think Dave Ramsey has said this before, but there's only 2 ways to get wealth: make more and spend less.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Right.
And if you're spending more than you are making, then something's got to change, or you're going to be in bondage, or you're going to go bankrupt. And those are pretty easy terms in which to live.
Something I noticed about what you said that I really like was that it sounds like when you're doing this evaluating thing in your life, it seems like something that other people should emulate is that you are evaluating all of things. You're trying to put all the things on the table. So you're starting with this level of self-awareness that I think most people who are just kind of coasting, they're on cruise control, are missing, because I think a lot of times when you're on cruise control, unless the problem is really extreme, you don't notice. It can be easy to be like, okay, well, I'm probably relatively fine in this level. But so I wonder if we get sometimes overconfident about being possessed by consumerism, as you talked about at the end of the last episode, because we're like, okay, yeah. The Kardashians and the Trumps. They've got a big problem. Yeah. But I'm fine. So I wonder, is there a way, advice that you could give to people who are trying to figure out how to add more self-awareness to all of that? And clearly part of it is considering all of the different things, including your house and your other things, and not just maybe the obvious things.
Yeah, well, I mean, Socrates said, was it Socrates or Plato that said the unexamined life is not worth living? Who was it? I don't know why.
I don't know.
You
which
can Google
one.
it while I'm talking about
I'll find it.
I use that quote all the time, and now I think it's Socrates. That now that I'm actually trying to quote him, I can't remember who it was. But
we will figure it out.
But I think that there
Plato.
Plato.
It was Plato.
Plato.
Well, supposedly uttered by Socrates at his trial, but it was recorded in Plato's Apology.
Okay, so either way,
I'll give you Socrates. You meant Socrates. It was recorded by Plato.
The reality is I think a part of our spirit. I think why the Lord wants us to meditate. I think why it's important to read Scripture and be reminded of Scripture. Why solitude is a good biblical virtue is that it's during those moments where we don't compare ourselves with bad models, but with the good model.
Yeah.
With what our Heavenly Father would do. And the life of Jesus.
Everyone rewind back 10 seconds and listen to that again. That's really, really good.
Yeah. So often many of the foolish mistakes we make are caused because we're comparing and competing with unworthy standards.
Yes. Yeah.
And comparison and competition is always a bad idea unless we're comparing ourselves to Christ and truth and something that's absolute and absolutely virtuous.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll talk about this topic, and I'll have a friend of means will come to me and say, "Man, it sounds like you were really against wealth and being rich." And no, I'm not. I believe God gives some people the gift of making money. But at the same time, the rich people I know who are the most content are also the most generous. They're not, and many of the really wealthy people I know are not leaving their money to their children because they think their money would ruin their children, but rather they're leaving it to Christian causes and generous venues. And you say, Dan, why are you talking so much about this? Frankly, I'm going through this personally right now. So I'll be 64 this year. And biologically, I know where my clock is going to stop ticking because of my family heritage, my own health issues. So I may It'll be a blessing if I have a decade left. So that's just the reality. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't scare me, and I don't want sympathy for it. That's just the way it is. But so now that I know that if I live to be 74, I will have lived longer than most of my male relatives have ever lived on the side of the family that I favor. And I've already had my first heart attack. So knowing that, so I say, okay, what have I been able to accrue? And I've been in ministry, so I'm not a wealthy dude, but I've been a careful dude. And I've always worked 2 jobs my entire adult life. So what am I going to do with these resources in a way that says Dan in his death thought about eternal things the way he thought about them in his life?
Yes.
And so I'm meeting with financial counselors. I had a meeting yesterday. I'll have another meeting next week. And I'm asking, how can I invest? How can I live appropriately so I'm not a burden on somebody else? But how can I finish well financially? I don't want the government to support me. I don't want my children to support me. And I've worked hard so that they won't. But I also know this: I'm not going to be able to work forever, nor does anybody want me to work forever.
Yeah.
I will work, but work for pay. Nobody wants me doddering around. If I did live to be 80, they want me doddering around here looking for things to do. So how do I plan those? And whether you're 30 and you're just getting started and you don't own your first house, but you got a baby, or whether you're 45 and your kids are now in their late teens and you want them to launch well, but these are the peak years where you need to start thinking about, what am I going to do about retirement? What if Social Security isn't there? And Social Security was never supposed to be my only retirement plan. What am I doing? Or whether you're in my stage of life in your 60s and you're saying, okay, I want to leave a legacy, one that says that he viewed the resources God gave him in an appropriate way. And so this kind of goes back to one of the things I would counsel folks to do as we pursue an anti-consumeristic mentality is we have to embrace rest. We have to embrace Sabbathing. We have to embrace thoughtful, intentional reflection. And if we have overcommitted and we're addicted to overstimulation and we are overspending and overscheduling, see a theme arising here? We can't rest. We can't think. If you look at your phone, go to the data on your phone, and you are spending 5 hours a day scrolling through TikTok. If you're spending more time in the bathroom than you are sitting around a table with your family because of the presence of a phone in your life, there are solutions to that are really not complicated, but they require discipline. Yeah. It's turn your internet off at 8 o'clock at night. It is no phones at the table. It is I'm not taking. Remember when you used to go to your grandma's house and there'd be Reader's Digests on the back of the toilet?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I kind of missed those days a little bit.
Yeah. Nobody has Reader's Digest on the back of their toilet anymore. What really gets me, you go to a public restroom and you can hear everybody playing their TikTok videos all the way down the row.
Like, why are you? Why are the speakers on?
Yeah. Stop it. But in the end, those are really easy, but they're extremely painful because they deny us what we think we are entitled. I should be able to sit here and watch this. I should be able to scroll. I should be able. No, at some point you don't do what you could do, but do what you should do.
I mean, it's reinforcing the problem at the same time because if you're on the phone doom scrolling a lot, I imagine you are more likely than not also on social media and constantly then, like, how do you keep your mind from comparing yourself to your friends who live around you?
And so there's a biblical principle that if you study the word studies, it's defrauding. So defrauding is putting yourself in a position where you see something that you cannot naturally acquire unless you sin to get it. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. For instance, that's why I say to young people, don't be in your bedroom watching television on the bed when mom and dad aren't home.
Okay. I just didn't understand the first way you said it. Okay,
so what's
don't put yourself in bad
is,
positions.
Yeah. You put yourself in a position where temptation is natural, and you're not going to be able to get what you want unless you sin.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you're only human.
That makes sense.
You're only human. All right. So I say the same thing is if you're not able to pay your bills, and if you are spending more money than you're bringing in, or if you're going to have to put it on a credit card because you haven't saved for it, don't go to Disney World.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that really clear.
Yes.
Don't go to Disney World.
Yep.
Don't buy the new car. and don't refinance your house to pay it off, because you've already demonstrated that you didn't have enough discipline to stay it out the first time. You're not going to do it the second time. And there's exceptions to all these rules. There are times when you can demonstrate, I have this under control. It's better, wiser for me to refinance. Right. But so penalize yourself thoughtfully, discipline yourself thoughtfully, and tell yourself no sometimes. It's just a good thing to tell yourself no sometimes. Yeah. We spend so much energy rationalizing why, I've had a hard week. Therefore, someone was unkind to me, so I'm going to treat myself. I deserve a break today. Go to McDonald's.
I never do this at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but we all do it. We're often,
you're going to make me all feel bad coming out of today's session. Man.
But our whole culture tells us that. You know why our culture does that? Because they want you to buy their product.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've worked hard. You've earned this. Go put it on a credit card. We make it easy for you. And then we're going to charge you 24% more than you ended up thinking you were going to pay for it. Mm-hmm. If you pay it off in 1 year. Every year after that, you're going to pay 24% more on it. It is criminal. It is criminal. If we had to pay it with cash out of our front pockets, we would have. And one of the things Trump said he was going to do, I hope he does, is what they do on credit cards is highway robbery. 24%. That's loan shark country, and yet I talk to young people all the time who are. We're saying, I'm just going to put it on the credit card and pay it off when I can. Well, really, you're going to pay 3 times what you should have paid for it. Or you could wait for a year and pay for it in cash.
Yeah.
But part of that, like you said,
involve waiting.
Keeping up with the Kardashians has told us that we do not have to deny, nor is it good for us to deny ourselves until that moment. Right. But that's why people have sex before they're married. That's why people become alcoholics. That's why people, embezzle from churches. I see it all the time. That's why we don't give when we see a need. Living your life where you're spending less than you make frees you to be able to do some really cool things. And I'm telling this story, and I don't want it to look self-serving. I'm older. I've lived a long time, and I have resources but I was down in Florida the other day. And there was this woman, and we were in an area that had been hit by a hurricane, and they had just reopened. They'd been closed for like 60 days. This lady was from Missouri. Yeah. She's from Mexico, which is not far from Moberly, where I grew up. We started talking, and she said, it's been really, she said, thank you for coming in and coming to this restaurant. She said, because it has been awful. We haven't had any jobs for 2 months. So we had to talk, and we talked about Missouri and so forth. And when I left, I brought her over, I said, do you receive tips, or does it go into the pool? Does it go back into management? She goes, no, we each get to keep our own tips. And so I left her a $50 tip. She comes back over and she goes, you made a mistake. And I said, no, I didn't. I said, I did this. And she started crying and for the kindness. And I was able to witness to her. I said, I want you to understand this. This isn't because I said, I hear a need in your heart, and I'm a pastor. And the first thing I felt inclined to do is, how can I bless you in the midst of going to this? I was able to witness to her and able to do these things. And it's been 2 months since I did that. And I look back on it, and I still pray for her every time I think about it.
I love this. I love, I think it's just so important, especially when Christians go out. If you're going to pray at the beginning of your meal at the restaurant, you better give a big tip. And I'll never forget, I don't have a lot of very nice things to say about Mark Driscoll at this point, though for a little while before I knew what I know now, I was a fan. I thought he was a really good communicator and stuff like that, but learn more, listen to the podcast, whatever. But there was, during the short time that I was watching him, there was a moment that I'll never forget, and I still appreciate that he did this as a pastor, is he stood up in front of his church. Now, I mean, he was willing to call it his church more than most pastors, and sometimes too much. But he basically said that he had at least one experience going to a local restaurant in Seattle, and basically found out that this was a place that a lot of his congregants would often go after church on Sundays, and he found out that the wait staff hated when his congregants would come in, when the church people would come in, because they were so cheap. They would tip less, like everyone knew, like just as a pattern, as an overall pattern. And he was like, this is not okay. And basically he gave a huge tip, or it was like we're going to like send a check to the waitstaff, or they did something nice that Mars Hill could have done or whatever at the time. But like also was like, hey, this is not okay. This is not how we should be seen. I appreciate that you did that.
And I think that is a challenge for all of us, which we are not going to be able to do. Frankly, if you can't treat the people who serve, and you say, I hate tipping, I hate the whole tipping culture. So do I. I think it's insane. I would rather pay $5 more for my meal and be done with it at the end. But this is we get to make the rules. This is how it's done. Yeah. So play by the rules. And if you can't afford to take care of the person who's serving you, then don't go out.
Yeah.
You're not entitled to them serving you for $1.90 an hour because they've got kids to feed and rent to pay. Yes. So don't go out. And whatever you do, I'm going to rant now, those stupid tracks that have,
oh my goodness,
that look like $100 bill.
Don't do it. Oh, I hate it.
I saw somebody just talk about doing that on Facebook one day. I
have a really good story about this tracks.
Their lunch, and they got defensive about it. I know people who came to know to Christ, and I don't believe you. You could be standing on your mother's grave with a Bible in each hand, and I don't believe you.
I'm willing to believe maybe one person, maybe. Okay, so now I'm going to rant a little bit.
Okay, you rant.
So this doesn't necessarily have to as much to do with consumerism as like the thinking that there's like easy, cheap ways to evangelize. So I was at College of Sequoias. It's a small college in Visalia, California, south of Fresno. A group that I knew, a pro-life group that I knew, was going to do an outreach, and I was going to come and hang out with them and talk to some pro-choice people and kind of watch what they did and stuff. And so they set up, so they come down, and they had made an interesting choice, as they had brought like a Christian evangelist guy with them who was not there to talk about abortion at all. He was just kind of there. He was sort of like on for the ride. They were doing this tour of California colleges, and he was getting a cheap, he was just getting, so he wasn't hanging out like with us for a lot of the time. He was like sometimes somewhere else, and we're talking about abortion. But for a while, he was standing in front of the pro-life display, like right in the middle of the road, passing out these things to everyone who came by. And I grabbed one. I was curious. I'm like looking at it. It was one of these like fake, wallets with the cash coming out, or look like money or something like that. It was the one that looked like money, I think it was. And so I ended up. I'll never forget. For about an hour, I went on the other side of the path so I could just watch this. I was tired anyway. Maybe I was partly excusing a break, but I was like, I'm going to sit down for a while and just watch this thing. And I would watch people mainly come down from this direction, and the guy would be, and they would take the thing, and he's not watching anymore. He's watching the other direction. I'm keep on watching as like, what happens next? As they walk to the big, beautiful library at College of Sequoias. And what happens is they're looking at it, and pretty quickly they would see what it is, and their body language, like they're like throw up their head, be like, I've been tricked by the, and they throw it in this trash can, like this trash can right before where they were going. And I went over there to look at the end of the day, and there is dozens and dozens and dozens of the same track in the same trash can. And I was just so sad because I'm like, this guy means well. I hung out with him for a little while. He was a nice guy, but he's also telling a lot of people that are like donating to him monthly that like, I evangelized to 1,000 students today.
Oh, yeah. And here's the phrase they often use, and we sowed a lot of seeds. Well, you know what? The farmer who throws seeds on concrete is an idiot.
Yes.
He's an idiot.
It was complete rock. It was complete concrete.
We use that as an excuse to rationalize stupidity in many cases. You till the soil. Yep. You water it.
Yes.
You begin by listening. I mean, there's just so many other things that we need to do a whole podcast on this.
We should do a whole podcast about this.
Things you shouldn't do when evangelizing.
Yes.
Yeah, because it damages. It turns us into stereotypes.
Yes.
And you know what? A lot of people don't tip the way they should. There's entire demographics that don't. But you know why they notice us? Because we claim to be different.
Yes.
Because we come right from church with our bulletin. Because we do pray before our meals.
Yes.
So that comes with the responsibility.
It's hypocrisy.
Right.
It's obvious rank hypocrisy.
It is. And we have a responsibility as stewards of the reputation of Christ, if for no other reason. And that's why I think, generosity is not simply about consumerism and giving money. The person who is generous is the person who finds out their neighbor's sick and they make them soup. It's when they know that they had a knee replacement surgery, they mow their grass.
Yeah.
It's when they see the single mom whose tires have threads or the treads worn off, and they see the steel belts in there, say, "You're going to Costco with me this afternoon and you're getting a new set of tires." That is generous living. That is anti-consumerism.
Yeah.
That is making a difference. Yes. Not everybody can buy a new set of tires, but we can all make a bowl of soup.
Yes.
Not everybody can take a missions trip, but we can all walk across the street. And so when I talk about consumerism from the American perspective, what I'm just begging folks to do is stop and ask yourself, Holy Spirit, show me areas in my life where I don't care for the abused. I don't respond to the poor. I walk by the lost. I am not being the ambassador for you that you deserve. And then make some changes. Yeah. That's all it is.
And focus, and just to add one more thing, I know we're long, but while you're doing that, focus on maybe the areas that you are not most naturally disposed to care about too.
Oh, that's a good point.
What are the blind spots in your life? Because a lot of times, based on maybe the podcast that you listen to all the time or whatever, you might have blind spots in one area, or might be told, you should be listening to both sides of things, and you should be trying to avoid Yeah.
We're going to do a whole episode on blind spots and bad evagelism. I've just written it down.
Done.
That's a great way to end an episode, for us to have 2 more episodes ready to attempt at some point in the future. So, hey, thank you so much for listening to Dan and Josh rant today.
I know.
And, it really, Josh, because I have all this, me, I outlines and support and so forth. And these episodes did not turn out anything like I thought they were going to, but I hope they're better, because I hope you heard from our heart. I hope as you watch this or as you listen to this, that the Holy Spirit will simply say to you, what adjustment can I make in my attitude and in my actions that is worthy of the truth that I believe and that I want to live? And then just make the change. It's not that complicated. And if everybody does that, we'll make a difference in a lot of lives. As always, thanks for listening to us here at Life Talks.